Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Mike Schwartz with Demonstrated Success, and I'm excited to introduce Stephanie Chickanesi. Hopefully, I got that right, Stephanie. And also, Sarah Gallagher is going to be with us as well. Today, Stephanie's going to be talking to us about giving us some overview and tips for implementing Reader's Workshop. And I'm excited that Stephanie's joining us. She's got over 17 years of experience teaching young early readers in public schools, originally in Providence, Rhode Island, and then more recently she's currently a reading specialist in New Hampshire schools. So Stephanie has some really great experience in Reader's Workshop. Just to give you some, as well, Sarah Gallagher, who's on the phone, also has some great experience in both Readers and Readers Workshop, and she'll also be interjecting a little bit throughout the presentation. Just to give you some overview about the workings of the webinar utility or tool, you should see in your control panel an area to chat. Typically, we mute everybody just to prevent the background noise, but if you have any questions, please type them in the chat session. We'll be monitoring those, and we'll get those questions to Stephanie. Additionally, you can raise your hand. There's a little button to raise your hand on the control panel, and we can unmute you if you want to ask a question through voice as well. Also, I should point out that on the control panel, there's a section that says handouts, and you'll see that there are 4 handouts. There is a certificate, so you can get professional development credit for the workshop or the webinar. There is some login directions, and those login directions get you to our Demonstrated Success resources page. The resources page on Demonstrated Success website has all the handouts, both from this webinar as well as all our past webinars. It also has the recordings of all the webinars. So if you want to share this afterwards with other folks in your schools, you'll be able to share the recording of the webinar with other folks as well. So please take a look at the login to the Demonstrated Success website, take a look at the resources. We have many different webinars and workshop resources out there that you should take advantage of. And then also on the handouts, you'll see there's a handout that says Reader Workshop Handouts to Print. Reader's Workshop Handouts to Print. Stephanie encourages you to print those out right now. It might be, or at least open them up on your own screens so you can view them easily as she's going through the presentation. Additionally, the PowerPoint is here too, so you'll have that PowerPoint that you can use in your own schools. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for leading us today in Reader's Workshop, and look forward to what you have to say.
No, thank you so much for having me, Mike. Hi, everybody. Like Mike said, my name is Stephanie Chickanesi, and I am currently a teacher in New Hampshire, a reading specialist. And I'm really excited today to talk to you about tips and just an overview of how to implement Reader's Workshop successfully. So we're going to go ahead and start the presentation today. And if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask as we go along, or you can also wait for the end and we can have a question and answer session and everything. So I will be referring you to some of the handouts. So if you don't have them, you could pull them up, or you can certainly jot them down and look at them at another time if you weren't able to print them out. Okay, so let's get started. So our objectives today, what do I want you to take away from this? I want you to just understand the components of Lucy Cochrana's Reader's Workshop model. And I want you to be able to learn some strategies that will help you implement Reader's Workshop effectively in your classrooms. And as well as I want you to gain some confidence and some tools for conferring, because conferring is really a big part of Reader's Workshop and being responsive to students as readers. So I want you to be able to hopefully walk away with some tips and tools for that. So we start off by saying, why Reader's Workshop? Why do we want students, or why should we implement Reader's Workshop? Because there's so many ways to teach students how to read. But Lucy Cochrana's really says that we need to allow students lots of time to read. And it's critical that they read with engagement, that we model engagement for what great reading looks like, and that we give them an opportunity to engage with high interest books. So books that they're really interested in, books that they get excited about. We want to give them time to do all of that. And really, it's the lots of time to read. And the best way to do that is to allow them to read every single day. And Reader's Workshop is one of the models or the programs that I feel does that the best. And it really fosters a love of reading for students. And it allows them to apply, that's the biggest thing, it allows them to apply what they've learned in, we're going to talk about mini lessons, in their mini lessons. They can apply that right into their reading immediately following. And sometimes that application piece is lost. So Reader's Workshop is really a great way to make sure that we're putting it all together for students. And we know that learning to read isn't magic. It really requires that teachers reflect on their own strategies as readers, and they reveal those strategies to kids. So we're going to showcase, as a teacher, we're going to showcase ourselves as readers in the classroom and let kids know how much we love to read, what we love to read, why we love to read, and model that for them so that then they start to feel that as well. And good instruction involves demonstration and supported practice. So we need to tailor our instruction based on the learner using assessments, and we'll talk a little bit about assessments. But Reader's Workshop really allows teachers to think aloud, model strategies that they use as readers. You know, you get to say things like, I want to tell you a secret, or I want to show you a trick today, or maybe I want to take you on an adventure. With explicit instruction, and then we're gradually releasing students back into their books to try it out on their own. Reader's Workshop is able to get students to love reading, and really that's the end goal, and that's magical. It's magical when, you know, it's magic when you see kids open up a book and they share it with their friends and they can't wait to tell their friends about it, or that they're buddy reading and talking about a text even if they can't read the words, but they're telling a story from a book that maybe they've memorized or just from the pictures. Or how about when you go in and you see your own kids, or you hear that kids at nighttime are staying up late because with their little flashlight on their head and they really just want to finish the next part of their story or the next chapter in their book because they can't wait until tomorrow. Or when they're starting to write about reading, and they're starting to use author's craft in their own writing and bring that in to, you know, another part of their day. That's where we see the magic of Reader's Workshop. And when you start seeing all that stuff, you start realizing how powerful Reader's Workshop can really be. So I want to go through, there's about 10 essentials to reading success that Lucy Calkins said we must have in order to, you know, be successful readers or make our students successful readers. So I'm going to go through those and then give you some examples about each one. So the first thing that she says is that students need teachers who demonstrate what it means to live richly literate lives, wearing a love of reading on their sleeves. And I love this one because we can't show our students, or we can't make them love reading if we don't demonstrate that we love reading, if we don't show them that we read all the time and the reasons why we read. And so really wearing a love of reading on your sleeve each and every day in the classroom is the number one thing that is going to foster an environment in your classroom that's going to be rich and with reading, rich with love of reading, and really is going to move your kids along. So really that's the number one thing. We have to be excited about reading. How do we do that? We do that by looking at the components of Reader's Workshop. And the components that go into a Reader's Workshop is you start with a mini lesson. Every day you pull the students up and you start with a mini lesson for 5 to 10 minutes. And then after that mini lesson, you're going to send them off for some independent reading. And I put the times here, 20 to 30 minutes for our primary grades. But when you really get into grades 3 through 5, you're looking at anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes of them doing some independent reading on their own. But within that time, that's your time to do conferring and small groups. So you're doing that while the students are reading independently. And we'll talk a little bit more about the management of that. You're going to pull back to do a mid-workshop teaching point, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, just to remind students what you're doing, what the task is, or to share, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then you're going to pull them back for 5 minutes at the very end to share and talk about how your skill or your strategy worked out today. So those are really the components that Lucy Calkins says makes for a successful readers workshop. And you really want to make sure that you are attending to each and every one, that we're not skipping a part, we're not skipping the share, and we'll see how important that share really is. And we'll go through each of these a little bit deeper. So a mini lesson really is just explicit instruction. We give explicit instruction all day long, but this part is just going to be focused on reading. It's on a specific reading strategy, and it's taught within 5 to 10 minutes. So let's look a little bit closer at what a mini lesson is. So it starts with a connection. So for that connection, you're going to see that if you've browsed through the Readers Workshop units of study already, if you've been doing it, you know that the language is there. Lucy Calkins gives us language in the beginning of the mini lesson. It usually starts with a story that the students can relate to, and it weaves in the lesson that you're going to learn that day. It allows the students to get a picture in their mind or to relate your teaching back to a story or something that's previously taught. And then after you make that connection, you're going to state the teaching point. You're going to tell them exactly what you want to teach that day or what they're going to learn. And then you're going to provide a concrete instruction, explicit language, and you're going to model it. You're going to actually do it. So many times I have sometimes walked into classrooms where teachers maybe make that connection and they tell the students what they want, and then they say, go off and try it. That teaching part is really the key for this mini lesson, because it's going to show them exactly what's expected. If you model it and show them how you do it, then they're more than likely they're going to take that and they're going to run with it, and they're going to try it in their own reading today. So you're going to model it. And then you're going to ask students. The active engagement is another piece that sometimes we forget. We want to ask them to try it right there in front of us. So this is not the send-off part. This is the part where right in front of us, after I've taught you what I want you to do today, I'm going to ask you to try it out right in front of me. And sometimes that means that you turn and talk to a partner, or maybe you use a book from your own book bin, or that you look at a book that I've chosen, the teacher has chosen a book, and we're going to look at it together on the document camera, and we're going to really hone in on that strategy that I just taught you about. Or they might be reading it along with you, maybe almost like a shared reading. But either way, that is the time that you're going to be able to figure out or gauge who understands your teaching point, who might need more direction there. You can kind of figure that out in that tiny moment of active engagement, those 2 minutes, because then those are the students that you might want to target when they go off to independent reading, and you might want to check in with them. And the last part to the mini lesson is to link it to their own reading. Remind students that what they do can be transferable. So when they go off to their independent reading, they're not going to forget this strategy that you just taught them, but that they're going to bring it back, or they're going to bring it with them as they go off to read. And usually this is the part where you have an anchor chart, so you add another strategy. I love the Lucy Calkins sticky notes. If you've seen them or if you have them, they're such a great resource, because you can just take your sticky note of that strategy that you learned today and add it right up to your anchor chart, and you'll see it there. And it gives the students a visual and helps them remember not only the strategy that you just taught them, but you put it on an anchor chart, and all the strategies for that unit or that lesson are there. And the students can look back at those and refer to them as they're doing their independent reading. So that's really a great way to send them off to their reading. So after you've done all of that, I know it seems like a lot, but after you've done all of that in your mini lesson, which is 10 to 15 minutes, then you send them off for for their independent reading. But before we do that, I really want to give you a look into a mini lesson.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
So there was a question, I'm sorry, about on a couple of slides earlier with the independent reading, it said 30 to 45 minutes for grades 3 to 5, and it also said 20 to 30 minutes. And I think the question was asking, was that 20 to 30 minutes for the earlier grades, and is it always, let me read this, I'm sorry, is it always independent reading as opposed to reading by the teacher in some of the earlier grades?
Okay, so I'm just going to go back. So this slide right here. So yeah. When we talk about the independent reading, that is for lower grades. That is for kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And when we get up into third grade, we're expecting them to read 30 to 45 minutes. Now, the question probably is at the beginning of the year, am I going to see my readers go off for 30 minutes? No, and we are going to talk a little bit more about this in the middle of the presentation. But no, you're not. We have to build reading stamina, and that is actually also built into the Readers Workshop model on teaching students how to build stamina. So of course, when you have kindergarten or first grade and they first come in and you've got them for the first month, you're not expecting them to read 20 to 30 minutes of independent time. But with practice and as the days go on and building their stamina, you will see that they will be able to read up to 30 minutes. I am going into first grade classrooms and they're up to 30, 35 minutes sometimes. And it's awesome because it allows the teacher to really have that time to do the small groups and the conferring. Does it happen all at once? Does it happen right away? Absolutely not. So that's something that you're going to build and you're going to set expectations for and get excited about continually building their stamina. I hope that answers the question. And if not, certainly ask as we're going along.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm sorry. So this is Sarah. So I think there was a second part to that question, which I think is really important. I could be misunderstanding, but the second part of the question was, this doesn't include teacher read alouds. I think that's something to really stress upon and to answer that part of the question too.
Yeah, so this is not teacher read aloud time. Lucy Calkins has shared reading as make sure that shared reading is an important component of the Readers Workshop, but it's not included in this time within the mini lesson. Shared reading is something that's done outside of this time that you're looking at right here. And a lot of times, and we'll get into that, but a lot of times the shared reading portion is where you're going to introduce books that you will then bring in or use at the mini lesson. Because we don't want to spend 5 to 10 minutes reading a book, a brand new book to a student as either a read aloud or as a shared reading experience, because then we're never going to get to the teaching point. So when we talk about our mini lesson, we want to make sure that those 5 to 10 minutes are spent with a book that students are familiar with, which means you've probably read it ahead of time. Maybe you've read it multiple times, and you may use that book across a whole unit to go in and to try different strategies and skills within that one shared reading or read aloud book. And then the mini lesson, 5 to 10 minutes, is going to be actually teaching into a strategy with using that book as an example. Does that answer the question? Hopefully.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay. So now that we've kind of talked about what the components of a mini lesson are, let's take a look at what Readers Workshop looks like in action, because we can read it all day long, but what does it really look like? And this is a second grade Readers Workshop mini lesson, and I have a look for tool. If you were not able to print it out, it's absolutely okay. Maybe just jot down some notes as you're watching. I want you to just look for what the teacher is doing and what the teacher is saying and what the students are saying and doing during each part of the lesson. I broke it down so that you can look at, okay, what did she say or do for the connection part of the mini lesson? What did she say or do for the teaching point? And how did she actually teach it explicitly, and the active engagement and the link. So for each part of the Readers Workshop, you have a look for tool. So as you watch this today, take a look and jot down some of the what she's saying and some of the teaching points there. All right, here we go.
You're going to prepare as a writer too. So reading box, writing folder, in your back with Post-its and pins. Ready? All right, readers, come here. So last night, guys, thinking as it got so cold outside, it made me think of Christmas. And it made me think of this time when I was a little girl, and I told my mom all I want to do is go see the Nutcracker ballet. That's how the know what the Nutcracker is. So for Christmas, she got me tickets, and we went together. And it was so magical. And when it was over, I felt like I had been in a dream. And I turned to my mom and I said, that was so beautiful. And she said, your surprise is not over yet. I know one of the dancers. Take me backstage to meet him. I couldn't believe it. So we got up and we walked on the stage and we opened up the curtain. I couldn't believe it. There were people walking around back there. There were lights everywhere. There were doors. There were clocks. There were dressing rooms. Dancers were just talking to each other. I couldn't believe it. It was like they unveiled how the ballet was made, how it was crafted, and it made me think it's kind of like what you guys are doing as readers. You guys are like pulling back the curtain in the stories to see the author's craft. We learned last week about how books click together. Show me click together. Click together. Well, today we have to learn something new. Because authors don't write books just to entertain. They write books to teach us lessons. So friends, today as readers, I want you guys, when you get to the end of the book, to stop and think, what is this author trying to teach me? So I thought we'd start with the book that we love. Can you guys say, those dark squirrels? Just like old Mr. Bookwater, right? So one way to try and figure out what the author is trying to teach us is to start by retelling the story. So I'm going to start. Show me your magic fingers. Get ready for Rita. I'm going to start. Old man Bookwater was a frog, and the only thing he liked was. I think you guys already know the story. Can you turn to your partner with your magic fingers and retell the important parts of the story? Go ahead. I heard some really good retelling. So he loved this book. But guess what? He didn't just write this book so we can go, hey, I love this book, it's so funny. No, he includes lots of lessons in the book. So one lesson of this was, old man Bookwater shouldn't be such a blunt. He should try and light up more things. What do you guys think? Is that a good lesson? Is that a good lesson for us? Yes. Actually, guys, I kind of think that's a lesson for Mr. Bookwater, right? He shouldn't be such a grump. So what kind of lesson could he be trying to teach us? So Sophia, I thought maybe what he's trying to teach us is sometimes we do kind of feel grumpy. So when we're feeling grumpy, we need to not be a grump. We need to give ourselves a chance to like new things. It's important to try new things, right? Things like that. So friends, that's one lesson that we might be trying to learn. Say, don't be a grump. Don't be a grump. Give yourself a chance to like new things. That's like there's lots of other lessons in here. So now I want you one more time to turn to your friend and try to think of lessons that he might be trying to teach you. Okay? All right. Turn, wait for my commands. Turn and people. And what part of the story do you think they would have been teaching us that? At the end where the squirrel and but the dog and they turn and I agree. Don't you guys agree? They did all of these really nice things for Mr. Footwire to make him feel better. So maybe he's trying to teach us that when someone is sad, maybe you could do something nice to make them feel better, right? We need to treat others nicely. Go ahead, Dawn. Tell me a little bit more about that. That's tell me about that. What has it teach us to not be selfish? Because you didn't like a lot of things, right? So who is not being selfish here? Who learned that lesson? And also, weren't the squirrels being selfish? They're like, see, and then at the end, they weren't being selfish, right? Do you remember what they did at the end? They did to make him happy, right? So they weren't being selfish there either. So they're working together. They're all like working together and making a plan, right? In the story, the squirrels keep making a plan. So maybe he's trying to teach us it's important to work together. Maybe make plans like in Writer's Workshop, guys. It's important to work as a team. That's if you play sports. Do you work as a team? Yes. It's important to work together. So friends, eyes on me. We're going to work on this as you're reading like writers. And this is hard work. Not only do you have to think about how the story clicks together, you have to think, what does this author want to teach me? So I'll give you a little hint because this can be very challenging. Are you ready for the challenge? Yes. I would find a book that you've already read before to start with today, Lenny. Find a book you've already read before. Then you can just go retell the parts and try and find the lesson that the author is trying to teach you. Got it?
Okay, we can end here, Mike.
Great.
I'm going to bring my screen back up. I hope that you guys were all, that you could hear that. Okay, we back on my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope that you guys could all hear that. I thought it was a great example of the whole entire parts of a mini lesson that we talked about. If you couldn't hear it, she started off by talking about author's craft, and today is readers. That's what she was saying in her connection. Today is readers, and she gave a story about her and her mom at the theater, and that there was a curtain that she pulled back, and really thinking about what's the author's craft and what is the author trying to teach me. So she did that, and then she went into her teaching point, and she started retelling the story. She counted on her fingers just to give them an idea. Okay, we have to think about the book. But if you notice, that book was a book that she previously read, so the students knew it really, really well, and that really helped them when they did a quick turn and talk to retell the parts of the story. Then she pulled them back to actually give them the new teaching point. She used a mentor text and to teach the lesson about, let's think about what the author is trying to tell us. And she went through a few of the parts, and then she had the active engagement where she asked the students to turn and talk again and think about the lesson. She brought it back, and then she sent them off by asking them to choose a familiar book from their book bin. So they're not going to choose a new book, but that they're going to choose a familiar book that they've already read to go ahead and do the work that that she taught them today about the author's message. And then she puts a sticky note up there on the reading chart. So I apologize if you weren't able to get all that information. It is, you'll see, if you want to go back and watch the video, you can certainly do that. So how do we get there? How do we get students reading reading for a really long time. One of the things that I love is that this whole idea of building stamina. And there's this picture here of a classroom that I'm in that does an amazing job of making sure that students are independently working so that the teacher can do what she needs, her small groups and her conferring. And what she did was she started off, this is a first grade classroom, and she started off at the beginning of the year, Reader's Workshop, setting expectations. And she said, we're gonna read for 1 minute. And the students read for 1 minute, and they came up and they said, all right, you did an awesome job. So she put awesome job next to it. The next day she said, okay, we're gonna build on that. We're gonna start with 2 minutes. So it sounds silly to start that way, but the kids got so excited. And by the time that they were up to 13, 14 minutes, the students were giving her words on how they felt. And so this is just a great way to increase by 1 minute a day. Doesn't seem like it's a huge thing. But if you were to come in and say, okay, we have to read for 20 minutes today in kindergarten or first grade, that seems like a really long time for students. So if they can see that over time they can build their reading stamina and how it feels, and just understand the flow of the classroom, and that the teacher is able to get what she needs to get done during that time and really work with her readers, and the students get really excited about that. So I encourage you to use a chart for building stamina, because it's a visual. The students see it, they keep track of how long, and then the next day they might say, I want to read for 24 minutes, or I want to read for 25. And they held her to that, and they keep on going with their reading stamina, and they're all the way up in first grade to 30 minutes of independent reading time. Okay. But so during that time, students need opportunities to read high interest books. So during that independent reading time, we're hoping that they're reading books that they want, that they choose on their own. And that comes down to having think about your book choice in your classroom. What kind of, do you have a leveled library? Do you have books that students can browse? Does your school have a book room? Those are things that you want to reflect on, and maybe think for next year, if you're going to implement Reader's Workshop, you need to have a lot of choice for students. You need to think about what are my students interested in? Can I get more books on that? Can I have different genres? I want to have nonfiction, fiction, biography, chapter books. Think about all the different kinds of texts and reflect on your own library, because we really want students to have books that they want to keep on going back to those bins. They want to keep on pulling out different books so that they continue to love reading, and they want to and they have opportunities to do that. So we also want to have increasingly complex texts. So we want to make sure that as we're moving students along in their reading, that the books are becoming harder, and that they're not necessarily harder, but just more complex, so that we have other strategies that we can teach them for their appropriate grade level. So, yeah.
There was a question about back with the reading stamina when you're going up to 23 minutes or so. If you've got kids in class who already have more stamina, so they could read longer, in the earlier days or weeks, as Lucy Calkins, do you encourage them to, the teacher to make the time for those folks to read more at that point, or keep them all in the same pace?
To make the time for those students? I mean, when we're talking about the Reader's Workshop, it's hard, because you want to bring everybody back together to make your teaching point. I think that there are students that come in who can handle 20 minutes, in the beginning of first grade, who can handle that, but you don't want them to miss out on your strategy or your teaching point. So I guess what I would say to that is really keep the flow of the mini lesson, making sure that they're hearing the strategy, the connection, the share, that you're coming back to all of that. And then those students will have opportunities as the classroom builds stamina to continue to read, or at choice time, they can certainly, there's other opportunities within the day that child who can read for longer periods can, they're able to do that. But I mean, certainly if you see your classroom can do more than 1 minute, you don't need to start there. You can kind of gauge where your classroom's at and say, okay, well, we've been doing a great job reading for 20 minutes at this point in the year, but you know what, let's see if we can stretch it to 30, and then maybe you can increase the time from there. So you don't have to start at 1 minute. I just thought it was fun the way the teacher did it. And the students were like, oh yeah, I can read for 1 minute. That was so easy. You know, I can read for 2 minutes. So great, it's easy. And we're going to continue to build on that. So just keep that reading stamina up as you go along. So, but you have to draw the class back to go over the teaching point and to share out. And maybe that child can be the one that shares and says, wow, that was so easy. Or I can read for, I want to read for a longer period of time. And maybe that student will encourage other students to read for longer. We certainly don't want to hold them back, but we want to make sure that they're getting all parts of the mini lesson so they're not missing anything as well.
Thanks.
Okay, so when we think about independent reading time, so a good way to organize is to have book bins. So you can have bins, you can have a cubby, wherever it is, set a place in your room where every student has their own area to keep their own books. So we're talking about what might we see in a book bin? We are going to see Just Right books. That's their independent level, and some instructional level books. And we're going to see books within a band of levels. When we get up to grades 3 through 5, we want to have a band of levels so that they're not just reading just because we say they're a level M reader, and that's what the assessment shows, that they're not limited to just reading level M. They can read a little bit below that. And the reason for that is that we want them to be able to work on fluency. We don't want them to work super hard every single time they open up a book, because we want them to be able to enjoy reading. So there's different reasons why we read books. Some we just want to pick up a book and just read it and not really think about it and just enjoy the book. And then there's some books we pick up as adults and we want to really dig into the information and get to know more about a specific topic or everything. So we want to have different types of books in their book bin. So Just Right books within different levels, nonfiction, fiction, biography, whatever. We want to have a mix of it and kind of gear it towards what your mini lessons are. But then there's something called dessert books. And I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but I love this term because dessert books are books that kids love to read. Then maybe they can't read all the words. Maybe they can't read any of the words, but they love the pictures. They love it for the pictures, or they love it for the characters in the book. And a lot of times I find that these dessert books are coming from shared reading. They're coming from the books that the teachers loved in the classroom. And it's a sweet treat, just like a dessert is a sweet treat. It's a sweet treat when you're done reading your stack of books or your books during independent time, and you never want to hear students say, I'm done, I read all my books. Well, that's where a dessert book comes in. Go and read your dessert book. You earned it, So I love the idea of having a dessert book, maybe one or two that they can pull from that you have in your classroom library. Some other things you might find in the book bins are reading strategy bookmarks. And I'll show you, there is an example of that uploaded on there. And these are bookmarks that these are strategies or goals that you're going to set with them as you confer, or if you're in small group, and they can stay in their book bin to remind them that when they're reading independently, that they can look at this if they get stuck, or look at what their goal is for the day. You might have their sight words in there, or sight word cards or charts, so that if they get stuck on a word, they can refer back to it. Lucy Calkins has anchor charts, smaller, 8x10 anchor charts for the units that you can copy and put right in their book bins or their book cubbies. Book baggies are another thing that I love to make sure that are in there, because at the very end of the day or the reader's workshop, choose one of the books that you were really excited about, put it in your book baggie and take it home. Students should be taking a book home every single night if possible, so that a book baggie in their bin just reminds them to choose a book and take it home every night. Some other things might be reading pointers or tools and Post-it notes. You can never, ever have enough Post-it notes as you're going through these units. And they can interact with the text when you have the Post-it notes in there. So those are some things that you might find in book bins. Okay, so other essentials of reading success that Lucy touches upon is just the fact that students need direct, explicit instruction. And they need these in order to become proficient readers. And they need the opportunity to talk and sometimes write in response to text. So even though this is Reader's Workshop, we want to give them opportunities to write. And you'll see that in the units of study on the website, Heinemann website, you can find a correlation. You'll see how they map out. The Reader's Workshop correlates with the Writer's Workshop, and there's also a phonics portion of Lucy Calkins. So they map it out so that you can see how they align. And when you're teaching nonfiction, when you're doing a nonfiction reading unit, you can be teaching a nonfiction writing unit and then also working on certain skills within the phonics unit. So that is also on one of the resources on the website. And then readers need support reading nonfiction books. I've mentioned this, but we know that the Common Core really focuses a lot on nonfiction as well as fiction. And in the past, I know we've had so many fiction books I had so many fiction books in my classroom, and I didn't have a lot of nonfiction books for my students to read, but where I am now, there's just a wealth of the nonfiction books and topics that interest my students, and they want to pick them up. They want to read them. So we really need to encourage our students to read both genres and take a look at what their interests are and try to fill our libraries with as many nonfiction books as we can, because when they're reading nonfiction books, they're gaining knowledge about the world as well as increasing their vocabulary. And readers need assessment-based instruction. So we need to tailor our feedback specifically for particular students. And this is where we get into how do we assess our students. So here are some ways that we can assess our students and see where they're at. One is reading logs. So using a reading log is really great because it's not just about what books they're reading or are they reading each night, but reading logs are a way for you to kind of really dig deep into seeing what your readers are interested in. So it will tell you how many times do they read a specific book. Do they read a book over and over because they absolutely love that topic, or do they read a book over and over because it's an easy book for them and it's safe for them? So, being able to understand and kind of diagnose their reading logs will give you more information into them as the readers. You can also think about putting for the upper grades, how long are they reading? So it will tell you about their reading stamina. Are they reading one chapter a night, or are they able to read 2 to 3 chapters a night, or how many pages? And you can use those as goals for your students to increase stamina as well. So reading logs are an important tool for assessing your students, as well as running records. And we can have a whole workshop on how to do running records, but running records are a great way, and they don't to assess your students and really diagnose specifically what your students need. Are they, what are they attending to when they're reading? Or meaning, are they using meaning? Are they using visual cues? Are they able to scoop up words and read fluently with prosody? And running records are a way for you to really diagnose and keep track on paper how your students are attending to text. So you can pull up next to a student with just any book, have them pull a book from their book bin and ask them to read it to you, and you can just use check marks as an informal running record. Then you can also use running records or performance assessments like benchmark assessments, as well as keeping track of your conferences, your small group observations. So any informal observations are going to help you assess your students' reading ability. So conferring. Goals of a conference. When we meet with our students, we want to meet when we're conferring. Let me take that back for a second. Conferring and small groups are completely different. Small groups, we're meeting with maybe 3 to 4 students. We're being strategic in how we're forming our groups, and where they all have a common need and common strengths. When we're conferring with students, we want to provide them with that individualized feedback. We want to sit right next to them. We want to see what they're doing and what they've been working on. So when you pull up to a student for a conference, instead of just listening to them read and then saying, you know, great job, or here's what you can work on, we want to stop and ask them, like, what have you been working on as a reader? What strategies are helping you the most? You know, maybe what feels tough, or tell me how your reading's going. So we want to figure out a little bit more about how they're feeling as a reader, or what they're using as a reader. So we're going to, that's a little bit of a research. You're going to research and find out what they're using. And then we're going to decide, we need to compliment them. And I love how Lucy Calkins really points this out. Give your students a compliment. Compliment them in a way that applies not just to the day's reading, but also can follow them into, you know, tomorrow or in the future. So for example, instead of, as you're pulling up next to a student and they're reading books about a frog or something like that, you might say, you really learned a lot about the life cycle of a frog, and you might give them that compliment. But instead of doing that, because they're not going to be reading about frogs every day, you might say something like this. It's really helpful that you thought about the important information and you collected key words to help you learn about a new topic. That is a more specific compliment for them that they can then transfer into any other book that they might be reading. So we want to make sure that our compliments are transferable to other reading contexts. And then we want to teach them a new strategy. Do you mind if I give you a tip? And then you demonstrate the strategy or the tip, and then you ask them to go off and try it while you're sitting there. So a conference, or when you're conferring with students, is just a short snippet of time that you're really digging, you're really focusing just on that individual student, giving them some tips and tools, and then you're jotting down what they're doing as readers. And here is a conferencing tool. This is also in part of the handouts. And I love this one because it is just for one individual student, but it has the compliment, you know, what did you give them as a compliment? It offers, you know, an area for you to write your teaching point, and maybe for you to jot down some next steps. And you can use this for 3 times, you know, the 3 times that you conference with that student, and maybe jot down some extra notes. So I find that this one is very helpful and for me to organize and keep track of students. Because then I can, you know, if I conference with them the first time and then the second block, I can really look back at their what I taught them last time and then build upon that. Sometimes if you have a notebook, you're flipping through the pages and everything. So, but everyone has their own different strategies or tools that work best for them. But I thought I'd share this one because I really like to use this when I go into a classroom. I'm going to skip over the conferring video just for time's sake for now, and because we might have not been able to hear the previous one, but there is a video there if you want to go ahead and take a look at it. So I talked to you about how small groups are different than conferring. So we're conferring with each individual student, and then we also will pull small groups for our students, and these are responsive. It's a time where you can work with a group of students that have common strengths, common needs, and guide them towards transferring their skills. So these groups should be flexible. That's really important. There's so many times when, as a first-year teacher, I remember having students in a group for half a year, and then maybe the next half I switched them around. But I realized that some of the students were always in the same group all the time. And I learned over the years that they really need to be flexible. They need to be changing. As students grow, they need to change groups. They might be in one group one day, and the next day I'm going to pull them up for another strategy lesson because I know that's what they need. And I'm going to show you a tool. Let me go back, sorry. What are your students doing during small groups? Partners. They're reading independently and they're reading with partners. And some part of the time, so if you have 20 to 30 minutes of independent reading time, you might have 20 minutes where they're reading independently. I'm sorry, you might have 10 minutes of them reading independently, and then you might ring a bell, and then now they have to meet up with a partner. And setting expectations for your partners are really, really important. And this was just a chart that I loved that reminds students of what it's like to be a partner, that we're teaching, not telling, that we're working as a team and building good habits. And then I know that in their book bins, they had questions they could ask their partner as every day that they meet up. So having partner time and individual time every single day is really beneficial for the students. So during that whole time, you're breaking it up to some individual time, some partner time. Here are some other things that students are doing, because I know that this is the hardest part to organize when you're in small groups, when you're trying to get all your work done, and then all of a sudden you have kids that are coming up to you, or there's interruptions, or what am I going to do now? I'm all done. You really need to set those expectations up from the beginning of the year. So obviously students are reading independently, they're building stamina, so it will take time to get there. They're partner reading, but they can also read their sight words. If you have sight words in their book bin, they can read around the room. They can read sight words in the classroom. They can reread their text, or they can pull out the dessert book. And another thing is they can think about, I don't know if you have access to digital iPads or Chromebooks or whatever, RazKids, Epic, Seesaw, Pebble Go, those are great resources that you can have different students on during that time. So here's a chart that I love from a classroom that does this really well. And this is every single day of the week. She tells which students are going to be on RazKids, on the Chromebooks. The other students are going to go to Seesaw if she set up an activity for Seesaw, and the other students are going to do some book shopping. I didn't really touch upon too much about book shopping, but it's so important that students are changing out their books. And this is a way, making sure that every Monday, these 4 students are changing and finding their just right books. And what the teacher does here is she sets a timer. So the kids put back all their books that they're done with. If they feel like they want to read some of the books in their book bin again because they really love them, they can hold on to them, that's fine. But then they also have to choose new books. So she has a timer there, they flip the timer for 5 minutes, and they have 5 minutes to book shop. After they're done book shopping, they go right into their independent reading or partner reading, whatever part they're on for that day. But managing and planning that out is not a small feat. So here's a tool that you can certainly use and adapt to your own. But the one thing that I really wanted to point out on this is that if you look at the students here, the teacher listed her mini lessons, but then also she has teacher table. This is her strategy group or her small group. So on these specific days, these are the students she's working with. But if you notice that student number 6 is meeting with her more than one time during that week. So she might be pulling students up. I thought it was student number 6. Sorry.
It's 5.
I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah, okay. So student number 5 is meeting with her. I'm like, wait, I just lost that. Student number 5 is meeting with her more than once during that week. So that student's going to work on nonfiction, fiction sort, but then the next day she's going to pull that same student up and she's going to work on what would make sense. So she has the students laid out in a very specific way so that every student has something to do, and she's making sure she's conferring with every student at least once or twice a week, and she's making sure she's getting to small groups once or twice a week, as well as students being able to book shop, do RazKids and Seesaw. So that's just a great planning tool.
I have a quick question. I realize that this is almost over, but just super quick, if you can go back to the previous slide, just so the participants get a sense of the timing. So it looks like this teacher here meets with one strategy group a day and then confers with 2, 4
students, 4 to 5.
So are we looking
at
a 20-20 split, or what would be so 20 minutes at the strategy group and then 20 minutes per confer? So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so usually on any given day, there's about 30 minutes for this, the strategy group and the conferring. So she will usually take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to do a strategy group, and then she'll go off and she'll pull, right up next to students who are reading and try and confer with them. And any conferring could last anywhere from 2 to maybe 5 minutes with a student, depending on where they're at. She might just do a quick teaching point within that conference, or ask them to show her what she's doing. She'll jot down some notes and then she'll move on. So it's about, I would say it's about 30 minutes within that time frame. And of course, if she doesn't get to a student, if it doesn't work out that she, you know, obviously sometimes our plans don't always fall the exact way we want, she'll just move that student to another day and make sure that she confers with them next. We're looking at a 30-minute strategy group and conference time. Okay. All right, so then we talked about the mid-workshop teaching point, but this is just something the only thing I just want to mention here is don't skip this. This is a time for you to pull your kids away from their books because they've been reading for 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, some of them in the upper grades. And you want to just pull them away kind of mid-workshop and remind them what you asked them to do. Compliment them and remind them what your strategy is that you want them to bring back to you or what you want to share later, because sometimes they get lost in their books and by the time mid-workshop they're like, oh gosh, I didn't even do what you asked me to do. So this is a time to remind them. You can stop them and say, readers, can I have all your eyes on me? And here's what I noticed. And then ask them to finish reading and thinking about their own book and give them a little bit more time to finish up what you're asking them to do. And then you're going to pull them back to the rug. And this is the most important time because the end matters just as much as the beginning. And you want to share what you noticed. What did you notice during your conferring? What did you notice during your small groups or maybe at that mid-workshop teaching point? And this is a time when students can share what they did, what they learned, what they might work on next time. They can share any sticky note thinking that you asked them to. But this is really just an important time, and I know we're all crunched on time every single day, but this is really one that I hope that you don't skip because you're going to get some really great insight from the share time. The last one is readers need teachers to read aloud to them, and someone asked a question or about the read alouds, and it's so important that students just get to hear the teacher read aloud. You're showing them your love of reading. You're showing them what good reading sounds like, what your thinking sounds like. It's a big part of Rita's workshop, and it's a big part of students' lives, even from the very beginning. When they're born, parents are reading to them and doing like a shared reading with them. So they want to hear that same language, and they want to hear great books in school. And it's a way for even our lowest readers to have access to texts that they might not otherwise be able to read on their own. So read alouds are super important. And then there's also a list of suggested read alouds and read alouds that you can use within the units, in the Lucy Calkins units. And the last thing I would just want to point out is that readers need a balanced approach to language arts. And with our readers workshop, with our writers workshop, with our phonics, there's so many components that you have to fit into a day. But when we put all our great teaching together and we balance our instruction between reading, writing, word study, read alouds, we're going to create this cohesive environment where students are loving reading and writing. And that's really what we want to do every single day. And Rita's workshop is definitely a way that you can do that. So I hope that you got some information from this and some resources that you can take back with you. Here are some other resources. You definitely want to visit the Heinemann online resource page for the units of study. You'll find a wealth of information there. You can look at the study guide for the units of study for teaching reading. There's also suggested sequences, and a great book that I love is the Reading Strategies book by Jennifer Saravallo. She has a wealth of knowledge into breaking down what strategies can I use for conferring, when you pull up in your conferring or in small groups. I really like that one. And the Reading Project also has some amazing information that you can access. So I thank you for being here with me today. I'm sorry if the video didn't work, but I hope that you guys have a great night. Thank you so much.
Stephanie, thank you so much for leading us through this. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it. As we mentioned before, it will be recorded online so folks can look at it later, and you definitely can go, as Stephanie mentioned, on your own and view the videos, both the one you saw and the one that we didn't see. So thanks again for Stephanie for being here. Sarah, thanks for joining us as well. And everybody, if you're taking off next week, have a wonderful vacation week, a little relaxation. Thanks so much.